is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one and only Cam Lau. It is Monday, August 19th, 2024, and you are listening to the 84th episode of this podcast. Thomas Sowell is an economist, a black conservative, and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He says, the real minimum wage is zero. If you support what we're doing here at the Conservative American Message, you can show us your support by giving us a 5-star rating and follow or subscribe wherever you listen. To stay up to date on everything we're doing, please follow us on social media at the Conservative American Message on Instagram and Facebook. The Democrats have for a long time now been pushing for an increase in the minimum wage. Kamala Harris has been spouting off about the minimum wage recently, and I thought it would give us a good chance to look at how the minimum wage works and why it was started in the first place. It began at the federal level in 1938 as one of the many mistakes made by FDR during the Depression. FDR was one of the worst presidents in history, and people seem to do a really good job of forgetting that most of what is wrong with America today came from his policies. The New Deal, Social Security, Medicaid, minimum wage, all of these programs have stifled the American economy ever since they were passed. He was hugely popular among the voters at the time due to the American public refusing to practice delayed gratification. You see, to counteract the Great Depression, they essentially stole from all future American generations to help themselves get through it. It also set the precedent that the government is ultimately responsible for taking care of everyone and everything. But I could do a whole entire episode about how idiotic FDR was. Today, I'm just talking about the minimum wage, which was originally 25 cents an hour back in the 30s. They claim to have implemented it to protect the average worker from being taken advantage of by employers. But if an employee agrees to do a job for a specified amount of pay, there's no being taken advantage of. Any employee can say yes or no to any job or wage. In the Depression, there were not many jobs available, so basic economics, law of supply and demand. You have too many workers, not enough jobs. Therefore, workers, not as valuable. Today, our economic situation is reversed completely. We have too many job openings and not enough willing workers. Notice I have to say willing workers. There's a lot of people out there, but there's not enough willing workers. The minimum wage is even more senseless in this scenario. Workers are so highly valued in today's market that even the lowest entry-level jobs start out at nearly double the current minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour at the federal level. So that's the federal law. Of course, more liberal states have passed their own state laws to increase minimum wage at that level. While 20 states still defer to the federal requirement of $7.25 an hour, 30 states have increased it by anything from $1 to $10. The highest in the nation is in the District of Columbia at $17 an hour. Anyone with basic understanding of economics can see that the minimum wage is a net negative to our society. By giving a higher wage to the lowest level, most unskilled workers, you don't end up actually paying them more. In effect, you're just paying everyone else less. Let's think of it this way. If a gas station cashier makes minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, and a construction worker makes $20 an hour, what happens then when the gas station is mandated by the government that they must pay their employees $15 an hour? Do you think the construction worker immediately starts getting paid $40 an hour? No. Therefore, due to government interference, working in the construction trade is now dramatically less valuable, and so less people will be drawn to that line of work. Not to mention, the gas station is forced to pay this higher wage, and in order to make that pencil, they must either employ half the amount of staff or double their prices. When prices are increased and the consumer is forced to pay that price, well, the consumer is the same cashier that had their wage doubled. So you can go ahead and make twice as much money if you want, but it really doesn't help because everything in turn costs twice as much. But the obvious aside, there is a much darker past to the minimum wage laws that most Americans are unaware of. I know I was. When I started to dig into all of this around the minimum wage, I discovered that the greatest economist to ever live, Milton Friedman, actually proposed that the minimum wage is the most racist law that currently exists on the books. And after hearing his argument, I'm certain that he is right. At the beginning of the 20th century, certain labor unions were beginning to notice a trend. Nobody wanted to hire black workers. There was a lot of racism back then, and hiring blacks was looked down upon. However, black people needed to earn an income, so they offered to do the same jobs as the white men for a lesser wage. Business owners, as racist as they may have been, were surely not going to pay a higher cost of production solely for the sake of their employees' skin color. The unions, which were also racist and all white, were losing jobs to non-union blacks. To counteract this shift in employment, the unions lobbied to set a minimum wage in specific industries that would legally require employers to pay blacks just as much as whites. Of course, either way, the blacks weren't getting the best deal, but racially motivated low wages definitely beat racially motivated unemployment, and by a long shot. History showed that industries that didn't see wage regulation actually were the first to integrate and get away from the discrimination that was so common back then. Even as racism became a thing of the past, many blacks have still struggled in the job market even today. And in the 1960s, the largest sector representative of black employment was agriculture. As the federal government continued to expand its wage control, though, to agricultural workers specifically, rather than getting paid more, it just became uneconomical for farmers to hire so many workers. In consequence, chemical herbicides had to be developed to replace the human weed pullers. But I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole yet. All in all, minimum wage has never been a good deal, and it's especially hard on the minorities in this country. But it's been over 100 years since the government started meddling in all this, and it's still the same old song and dance from the Democrats. Kamala and her people are still trying to fool the working class into believing the lies that the government can somehow force companies to give you more. Trust a Democrat and you will get screwed. Heed those words. At the end of the day, if you have a problem with making minimum wage, it's your own fault. Just be valuable enough to make more money. It's really that simple. I'm telling you, a smelly hobo off the street could get a job for $15 an hour. Don't tell me that you're putting in your best effort and only making $7.25. Do better. If you want more money, act your wage. Well, that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.